I have spent the last hour trying to figure out what in the name of Bum Phillips that Bill O'Brien is doing in Houston. I've never been a big fan of his as a coach, as a strategist, as a play caller, and now as a GM? Question mark, question mark, question mark. What are you doing? Arizona just stole Deandre Hopkins from the Houston Oilers. And in so doing, Arizona got out from under. They dumped the salary, 3 years, $39 million, of David Johnson, who's been hurt and ineffective for the last couple of years, on Houston. And Houston did get a second-round pick, but wait a second. Arizona gets DeAndre Hopkins. He's a top 5 receiver, and there's nothing wrong with him. You can make a case he's a top 3 receiver. He was the security blanket. He was the everything for Deshaun Watson, and now he's with Kyler Murray. Congratulations, Kyler Murray.
Okay, Houston Texans fans, I'm going to catch you guys up on everything in case you missed out. So last year, I don't know if you guys remembered, but the Houston Texans completely botched re-signing Jadeveon Clowney. Pretty much what happened was Jadeveon Clowney was coming off of a contract year, or going into a contract year, and he was interested in re-signing with the Houston Texans. But I don't know what happened. Somehow, the Houston Texans let it be known that they planned on re-signing Jadeveon Clowney and then immediately trading him. And this rubbed Jadeveon Clowney the wrong way, and he pretty much said, I am not suiting up for the Texans this year. I demand to be traded. And the Texans traded Clowney to the Seattle Seahawks for absolute peanuts. They ended up trading Jadeveon Clowney to the Seattle Seahawks for a third-round pick, Barkevious Mingo, and a player named Jacob Martin, which, by the way, Jadeveon Clowney is the 2014 number 1 overall pick. He was picked over a player named Khalil Mack, as a matter of fact. He's a very, very talented individual.
I understand everybody's going to dissect, how we did it, and what we received back and what we gave Seattle. In the end, again, Aaron, we did what we felt was in the best interest of our organization and of our team moving forward. We feel like we got a 2020 third-round pick, and we also feel like we added 2 players that are very versatile players. They play hard, they play with great effort, they're high-character guys, and we feel like we did what was best for the team.
But then this was followed by another blockbuster move. For a team that was struggling to get first-round picks, for any player that could garner a first-round pick, the Houston Texans opted to then make a huge trade with the Miami Dolphins, trading for a player that was at one point considered to be a number 1 overall pick caliber, until a picture of a bong came out of him smoking out of a bong mask during the NFL draft. We're talking about Laremy Tunsil. I know he was picked in the 10s as opposed to the top 5, but at the time he was about to get drafted, Laremy Tunsil was seen to be a consensus top 5 pick until, the drama with him came out during the middle of the draft. Now, what bothers me here is the Houston Texans traded 2 first-round picks and a second-rounder to the Dolphins for Laremy Tunsil and Kenny Stills. And it's so weird because it seems like the Houston Texans are playing Madden and they're not really getting the full value of their players. Sure, we're in an era where in the NFL where, of course, teams are now more willing to get rid of draft capital in return for talent that is already established. We've seen this happen with the Odell Beckham trade and the Cleveland Browns. We've been seeing this happen more and more around the league, and more recently, we're seeing it today with the trade of DeAndre Hopkins. Now, here's the thing that's perplexing me. I am pretty convinced that at this point, Bob McNair, the owner of the Houston Texans, should say immediately that I've seen what I need to see. And he has seen what he needs to see, because the Houston Texans technically don't have a general manager. They have Chris Olsen as the interim general manager, and they have Bill O'Brien, who is the de facto general manager. And they're just showing me more and more that it is impossible, unless of course there's some circumstances that are possible, like Bill Belichick's a freaking genius, but it is not the right move to have these guys making their decisions. The trade for Laremy Tunsil I will approve of, because of course you're talking about protecting Deshaun Watson, who was already getting chased around the pocket a ton during his first couple years in the league. You don't want to put a player like that in risk. You don't want him to turn into the next Andrew Luck once you have a player that could potentially be the Michael Jordan of football, according to his Clemson head coach, Dabo Swinney. But here's the thing. If you want to be successful in anything, you need to make the most of what you have. And if you are to trade transcendent talent, like you have been trading transcendent talent, especially a player that is considered to be the best player on your team and the best wide receiver in the NFL by a long shot, and let me know in the comment section if you disagree with this, but I believe DeAndre Hopkins is easily the best wide receiver in the NFL, then you better yield a return that makes sense, because this is an all-time low for the Houston Texans, and I'll tell you why. The Houston Texans, for those of you guys that don't know, officially traded DeAndre Hopkins to the Arizona Cardinals for David Johnson. And of course, they also get a second-round pick this year and a fourth-round pick in 2021. Now, I know what you guys might be thinking. For those of you guys that are sitting there saying, oh, David Johnson isn't that bad. You know, David Johnson was considered to be a top 5 pick in any fantasy football league. He could easily get his talent back and really dominate in the league. Let me show you some statistics so you can understand where I'm coming from. I'm not trying to be a pessimist at all. I'm just trying to give you guys facts here, bro. Look, in 2016, David Johnson had a career year. He rushed for 293 times, had 1,239 yards rushing, and was killing it. He had 16 touchdowns rushing and also had 879 yards receiving and 4 touchdowns to go with receiving. Absolutely insane numbers. And then in 2017, he got injured. And then in 2018, he came back and played all 16 seasons. He had a brand new head coach named Steve Wilkes, who was only in Arizona for a year before they went ahead and got Cliff Kingsbury. But in that 1 year, he was kind of himself. He wasn't as dominant as he was. He had 7 touchdowns. You know, he had from rushing. He had 3 touchdowns from receiving. He had 940 yards on the ground, which is off of 258 carries. His yards per carry went down by 0.6. It was 4.2 in 2016. It was 3.6 2 years ago. And then last year, he hit an all-time low with Cliff Kingsbury as his head coach, as he's only been able to rush for 345 yards. He only started in 9 games. He got benched eventually in favor of Kenyon Drake. So you're not getting that David Johnson from 2016. This is not an even trade at all whatsoever, and I don't understand why the Houston Texans would even consider putting David Johnson on the same tier as DeAndre Hopkins. Furthermore, he's going to be 29 this season, and he's already falling off of a cliff. Do you think he's going to be able to get back to where he was? But here's the thing that's bothering me even more. A team that is so willing to give up on first-round picks is having trouble getting back first-round picks and clearly doesn't understand the value of their own players. And I'll tell you what I'm talking about, because Atlanta just made a trade where they traded Baltimore for a former first-round pick of theirs that clearly isn't working out, and that's Hayden Hurst. So Baltimore got a 2020 second-round pick and a 5th-round pick from the Falcons for Hayden Hurst. And the Falcons also got the Ravens' 4th-round pick in addition to Hayden Hurst. That's a very similar return to DeAndre Hopkins. Not exactly the same return, but that's a very similar return. So this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying that you cannot be successful in this league by just handing out talent. Now, initially when I read about this trade, I thought, okay, I understand what the Texans are trying to do here. They're trying to get rid of DeAndre Hopkins. There's plenty of wide receiver talent in this year's draft, especially in the first round. You have CeeDee Lamb, you have Jerry Jeudy, you have Henry Ruggs, you have so many good. Apparently, there's supposed to be 7 wide receivers taken in the first round alone, according to Mel Kiper, or 7 in the first 45 picks. I don't exactly remember off the top of my head. But on top of this, what's crazy is the Houston Texans weren't even able to get a first-round pick so they could draft one of those wide receivers to replace DeAndre Hopkins. So this is what's perplexing me about the entire situation. I feel like the general manager is handling Houston very irresponsibly. But here's another thing that I just want to bring to your attention, because I feel like I've been hating on the Texans this entire video because of their incompetence. It's time that we talk about the Arizona Cardinals, because I'm not going to lie, I wasn't the biggest fan of their general manager up until this point. I did not know what he was doing. Anytime you take a quarterback for 2 years in a row Anytime you hire a head coach one year, fire him, and then hire another head coach and pretty much start all over. Anytime you draft a quarterback and then trade him the year after, I'm not going to have a lot of faith in you right off the bat. And I think that's fair. But you have to say what you got to say about Steve Keim, but he made a very good move here. And if you want to get an idea of the situation that Kyler Murray currently is in, he now has DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk, an opportunity to potentially draft CeeDee Lamb or Jerry Jeudy, but I don't think that's going to happen because I feel like now the Arizona Cardinals are in a perfect position to focus on another area of concern for Kyler Murray, and that's the offensive line. And look, listen, to give you an idea, I told you a brief history of Steve Keim, and not to hate on the Texans even more, which I'm going to say prior to hating on the Texans a little bit more. I don't think it takes a genius. I think this is proof that it doesn't take a genius to take advantage of how inept the Houston Texans front office is. We've seen the Seahawks do it. We've seen the Miami Dolphins do it. And now we're currently seeing Steve Keim, a guy that drafted a quarterback in the first round 2 years in a row, do it. So here's the best part. The Arizona Cardinals are in a phenomenal position to build their offensive line or focus on the defensive side of the ball. If I was them, I'd build their offensive line. I recently put out a mock draft and had them taking an O-lineman in the first round because I just saw Kyler Murray running around way too much in his first year in the NFL. He's very, very short. He's very tiny, and he's one of the weaker players in the NFL in the sense that if he got tackled a decent amount, he would probably shorten his career. So you now have an opportunity to build an offensive line around him, and you now have the chance to really see what the air raid offense can do, because now you have the wide receivers you need. You don't have random wide receivers like Andy Isabella or Keyshawn Johnson. You know, you have Larry Fitzgerald there too still, which is fantastic because I feel like this team has the veteran presence and needs to make a deep run should they get it together. Now, I don't mean to blow things out of proportion, but I feel like if the Arizona Cardinals truly handle the rest of their offseason well, we could potentially see them in the playoffs next season. Bear in mind, there's an extra wild card team now in NFL games, in the NFL playoffs. So, for the most part, I have to tip my hat off to Steve Keim because before I used to think that this guy had no idea what he's doing, and the Cardinals were clearly not sure what they were doing. Anytime you fire a head coach after 1 year or trade a first-round quarterback after a year, you clearly don't know what you're doing. But this is a trade that could completely change the lives of multiple people, from Kyler Murray to Cliff Kingsbury to their general manager, Steve Keim, and I just have to tip my hat off to them. Let me know what you guys think about this trade. Aside from that, make sure you're following me on my basketball channel. It's youtube.com/theflightmike, and my brand new soccer channel, which is Flight FC. We're going to drop a video there as soon as we hit 2,000 subscribers. Check me out on social media in the description down below. I'll be streaming on Twitch later on. I'm your boy Mikerophone, and I'll catch you guys in the next upload.